Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Breakouts, a podcast where we interview extraordinary founders in just under 20 minutes. I'm your host, Akkshay Khosla. Now, you'll find many podcasts out there that are 2 to 3 hours long and interview these wildly successful founders after they've already made it big. But by that point, the founders are already 5, 10, or even 15 years into their journey, so their insights just aren't as actionable anymore. We're doing things a little bit different. We're interviewing founders that are on the cusp of breaking out so that you can learn the playbooks they're using to build category-defining companies today. And we're doing it in just under 20 minutes. Now, just before we get started, go ahead and follow us on Twitter at The Breakouts Pod, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and join our Discord community for aspiring founders. The link is in the description below. And I think that's everything I have for you. So without further ado, here's today's guest. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of The Breakouts. Today, we have not one, but two phenomenal guests for you. We have David Morgan and Jeff Sherman, the CEO and CTO of Zephyr AI. Now, both of these two raised an $18.5 million seed round for their company on March 30th of this year, or that's when it was announced at least. It's an absolute pleasure to talk with both of you today. So we're going to do two episodes together. In this first episode, we're going to talk about your startup, the story behind it, and how you guys think about winning the industry. So to get us started off, tell us just in a few sentences, what does your startup do and what problem are you guys trying to solve?
Sure. So I guess I can go ahead and take this one, having been around here since the inception of the business. So we're an AI first company, and our focus is essentially the full spectrum of precision medicine, everything from treatment to prevention. Within treatment, we look at areas like drug discovery, drug repositioning, identification of novel populations that might benefit from existing therapeutics. And then on the prevention side, we're really interested in helping payers and providers manage populations. So looking at the population health problem, trying to bring to bear AI in that space as well. So really think of the company as having kind of two arms. First being drug discovery, label expansion, clinical trial design. The second being population health management, predictive analytics, and insights.
So it seems like there's two things at play here, right? If I dissected this correctly. One is the data portion, so the database. And then two is the analytics and APIs on top of that. Did I classify that properly or did I miss something?
No, from a tech perspective, I think you're spot on. And it actually is core to our business that there is some commonality in that technology and in that data that facilitates both of these arms of the business.
I think from a strategic standpoint, just to elaborate a bit on it, what Jeff and the founders recognized early on, I think everyone in healthcare recognizes that there's a tendency to maybe oversimplify some of the biological problems that we're trying to attack. And it's beyond the comprehension of the human mind to really look at all these variables in aggregate. So the ability first to be able to ingest huge disparate data sets and talking about petabytes of data that's not absolutely clean and has holes in it. And so having a really, really great data team and having a really great data management and data science team was really the thesis behind the initial investment. And then training models on some sets to prove that we can do that clearly in advance of us raising that monster seed.
Very cool. And what are your personal backgrounds? What were the two of you doing before this startup? And what led you to this journey?
I've spent most of my career in healthcare, the last 20 years. I started out of university. I was a science major, and like many science majors, wanted to be a physician, or so I thought, and was actually talked out of it by some of the physicians that I work with at the University of Pittsburgh. You should just take a break. So I joined the Marine Corps for what I thought was going to be 3 years. I got into special operations that turned into 10 years, at the end of which I had to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up, and went to school at night and got my graduate degree and really found my love of healthcare again, and ended up in oncology initially, private equity backed company, and have been doing a series of private equity backed companies, either in hospital or laboratory diagnostics or IVD. And I was actually running a portfolio at Eurofins prior to coming here. And it was a series of conversations with one of the founders, Branford Standig, and Israel, who intrigued me. I wasn't looking to go anywhere like many folks. And then Jeff and I had a series of conversations, and he showed me what him and his team, with nascent as it was, and we were talking about a handful of people, what they're able to do on this data set. And it was so very compelling. It was time to take a leap. And since then, it's been a rocket ride.
David, I love that, by the way. I think you have such an interesting story and background. You bring such a wealth of experience. It's phenomenal. But Jeff, please feel free to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I took a more traditional path to get here. My background is in computer science with a specialization in machine learning. I cut my teeth career-wise doing applied R&D research in the government space for DARPA and IARPA. And that was great for a while, but it was difficult for me to have a lot of the work that we were doing kind of shelved. There wasn't a great transition plan. And so I left to join a very early stage startup in the health tech space, founded by Grant Verstandig, who David mentioned. And we had a great ride. We were acquired by United Healthcare. And afterwards, Grant and I discussed taking the lessons learned from that enterprise and kind of running it back again and doing it better than we did before. And so that's why we're here.
That's awesome. You two both have such phenomenal journeys to this point. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the actual product that you're building. Could you guys walk us through a user journey here? So imagine, you have your ideal customer. From the moment they discover your product to value realization, what does that look like?
Yeah, good question. I mentioned again that we have these kind of two arms of the business that we think of. One really dealing with drug discovery, repositioning, label expansion, and the other dealing with predictive analytics and insights for population health management. On the one side of the house, the first side, the product is really a research for pharma, right? So our customer would be pharma, and there isn't a software product per se that we deliver in that space. We build some internal research tools to facilitate our research, and then we deliver insights to that customer. Then on the predictive analytics side of the house, our customers, as I mentioned before, are payers and providers. And so what we deliver there is a system that gives them a population-wide view of their patient pool and shows patients who are at risk and suggests interventions that should be undertaken to mitigate those risks. So that's what they see the first time out of the box. And it sits nicely atop an EHR system. So it's very usable, very user-friendly, and backed by, as David mentioned, some great ML.
Yeah. The only thing that I would add to that is that 2/3 of what we do is a fusion concept, where Jeff and his team, which we'll talk about, is computational biologists, molecular biologists, data scientists, data managers who are working literally in concert on these data sets to interrogate them in a way and harmonize them in a way that we can build predictive algorithms for it. The way that we explain the business is that most of what we do is similar to, but they're disparate applications of healthcare, and whether it's predictive analytics for managing patient populations or drug discovery under the large umbrella. But because there's so much synergy in between of most of what we do, that these applications in healthcare are more a commercial problem and less a technical issue.
Interesting. Your main customers are healthcare providers and companies that are looking to make drugs. Is that correct? Or did I miss someone?
Yeah, so I would say customer-wise, we're looking at pharma on the drug discovery, label expansion side of things. And on the population health management, we're looking at providers for sure, but also payers who have channels into provider networks.
Gotcha. I heard a number of different use cases here, which are obviously powered by the same, technology underneath, but drug discovery is one of them, right? So let's take that example and run with it for a bit. Let's say that I am a pharma company looking to create a new drug. How would I leverage your platform to help me do that more effectively?
Yeah, great question. So what we have discovered at Zephyr, let's take the oncology space, for instance, where we focus primarily in drug discovery. What we've discovered is a new categorization or catalog to classify tumor vulnerabilities. And so what we're able to say about these vulnerabilities that we've derived from a whole swath of disparate data that we can get into in some detail if you're interested, is that they are indicative of pharmacological responses. So we've actually proved that out both preclinically and clinically. And so to the extent that one of these vulnerabilities, which is essentially a network of genes that constitutes this Achilles heel or sensitivity, to the extent there is no therapeutic that exists for that sensitivity, we can develop one. We can design one that targets that specifically. And so that's at a high level how we would engage pharma in that pursuit.
Gotcha. David, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd say that we're at the beginning stages of this, and we're not at all stealth. Clearly, we were having a discussion about our business. We see a lot of different applications, whether it's a novel molecule or it's an opportunity to repurpose a drug. Looking at these signatures, and it's across the continuum of genetics all the way down to proteins. And As we look at these signatures, there are opportunities for novel drugs and certainly for repurposing. And we're exploring both. We have one partnership right now with a company called Neximune and others in process. And what Jeff described is ongoing every single day. It's the opportunity to take all of these different variables, these perturbations, and do them quickly and build these networks, these models, so that you can interrogate them quickly and come up with high probability of success when you go to what is very expensive wet lab experiments. On the other side of it, if you think about it in terms of decision support, which is super helpful again, because you're looking at all of these huge longitudinal disparate data sets of patient information in EMRs, but also there's just, if you believe the government, they say by 2030, they want to manage all of the Medicare lives by 2030 at risk. That is not fee for service, not paying for activity anymore, but paying for an outcome. And that's a tectonic shift in the way healthcare is delivered right now. And there's just no way to do it right now without super accurate predictions. And there's no examples of the super accurate predictions that you need, because if you guess wrong, huge sums of money. And there's examples of companies out there that are trying to solve this problem, but it starts with creating really, really accurate prediction sets around complex patients, polychronic conditions. And Jeff and his team have done an exceptional job so far, starting with type 2 diabetes.
Interesting. So if I gave you like a molecule or some kind of tumor and then said that, hey, I want to go make a drug that addresses this, your algorithms can determine, hey, what are the potential complications or which direction should I actually go with that drug discovery based off of this predictive data that you have. Is that correct?
So both in the design of that molecule that you're talking about, and also which subset of the population will benefit from that molecule when it's applied. That's one of the things I think that's really interesting about what we do on the oncology side of the house is we don't consider tumors in the traditional way based on, say, cancer type. In our world, a breast cancer tumor and a liver cancer tumor may have hijacked essentially the same machinery. And if we can identify that, we know that we can treat them in the same kind of way. So that's the power of the system, I think.
Interesting. I guess, what are the different data sources that are important to you and your algorithms in making these kind of decisions?
For sure. So there's a lot to say here, and I'll try to be brief. So one of the things that was pretty inspiring in getting into this space is there's a huge international community behind oncology research, and they're putting out tons and tons of data, everything from omics data. So you can think of mutational profiles of tumors, transcriptome data, functional screens, which involve taking cell line models and going gene by gene and knocking out those genes and seeing what happens with respect to cell viability. So we fuse all of this omics and functional data, those molecular features plus functional screens, with an assortment of known a priori biological information. So protein-protein interaction networks, pathway databases, what have you. All this goes into the algorithm, and what comes out are these sets, this collection of sensitivities that has these properties, right? That they are indicative of pharmacological responses and also are recognizable. Like we can look at a molecular profile of a tumor and identify those sensitivities as being operative.
So I'm curious, in an ideal world, in some ideal future state of the solution you're building, would it be possible to say, take one type of tumor or one type of neoplasm and say that we can run all these different models in the cloud iteratively until a highest likelihood solution is achieved, so that you could take years and years of drug discovery that would go into it, and it could happen within the matter of days? Do you think that future state is possible?
I'm bullish on this. I think that we're going to reach a point where we can very rapidly iterate over these chemical structures and identify the perfect one to target a vulnerability that we've identified.
Key there is that, and both of you know this way better than I do, it's all about the dimensionality of this. And so when we're talking about small molecules, it's a simpler problem to solve. Jeff's team is now working on large molecules, way more complex when you talk about the biological systems and all of the different things that can happen across the omic spectrum and within that cell and all the different cellular functions within that cell. So modeling that becomes really, really, really tricky. And there's all sorts of folks working on all sorts of diagnostics that's going to derive that information, but we're still not there. As you heard of single cell technology, that's an area that we're going to have to get good at in ingesting data. There's a lot of folks doing single cell right now, but there's lots of different types of data that you'll need to ingest to be able to build an in silico model of the cell to really be predictive.
Very cool. I think you guys did a really good job of painting the picture, both for me and our listeners who are probably a lot less technical about this field than yourselves. So thank you guys. That was a treat. I'm curious about your business model. Can we talk a little bit about that and how you guys make money?
I'm going to again go to the two areas where we're going to commercialize our capability. As I said, 2/3 of what we do is ingest huge disparate data sets, different types, whether it be omics data or patient longitudinal information or socio-econ. I mean, there's lots of different things that go into these predictions. As we go to commercializing on the drug discovery side, there's kind of two models in AI-powered drug discovery. There's this idea where folks find a good idea and they decide to co-develop, and there's milestone payments, and at the end of which there's usually some type of residual licensing fee where you're, as a co-creator, going to get the benefit of that long term. That's where you see a lot of the, quite frankly, economical valuations for some of the folks in this field. And it's certainly doable. But as everyone knows, it is close to 90% of these molecules fail all the way through to phase 3. And so it's very hard to do. So to your aforementioned point, running through these perturbations as quickly as possible, there's tons of utility in that. So failing is part of the process. So failing fast, failing predictably, and failing as cheaply as possible is equally as valuable as success, as funny as that sounds. So that's the ideal business model for us on drug discovery. Find something that's pre-phase 1 or phase 1, and then find a partner and then co-develop that all the way to phase 3. And then place many of those pre-phase 1, phase 1s over many bets, if you will, over several different partners, 10, 20 partners. When it comes to predictive analytics, initially, I think it's going to be a SaaS-based model, and we'll work with healthcare institutions, healthcare systems. We've recently signed a contract with a large regional-based healthcare system in the DC area, and they'll be largely our launch customer. There'll be other opportunities to launch our value-based care module or product throughout the United States. ACOs are one primary customer. I would say, as Jeff said, carriers or providers and insurance carriers. And then there's probably some interest in EMR too, because this is going to work in conjunction with EMRs. And the model there is primarily SaaS. There's definitely an opportunity as we get more sophisticated, and you see this in industry right now, is going at risk, being at risk with other risk-bearing entities, be it the ACO, those providing drugs, pharma, ancillary providers, and in our case, the person that's providing the analytics to make sure that the patient population is managed as inexpensively, most importantly, as improving the outcome of those patients, but then as inexpensively and as effectively as possible.
Gotcha. So your business model essentially has two prongs then, right? The first is when you're developing models that can eventually make these predictions, you're doing that in partnership with other companies where you're taking a milestone-based fee to cover, for example, services involved in this. And then you're taking a licensing fee, which is essentially like a version of equity almost. And then the second prong of this is, hey, when you are delivering these analytics and insights to all these institutions and providers, you're taking a SaaS-based fee. Did I sum it up properly?
I think the first implementation is a SaaS-based fee, but I think there's opportunities to different commercial models that are going to evolve as the government and other commercial insurance entities move to risk-based. There'll be other models as well, but yeah, that's primarily what we're doing.
Very cool. Shifting gears a little bit, when it comes to things like drug discovery, biotech, it seems like there are a lot of players at play, right? Not doing the exact same thing as you guys, obviously, but there are. I'm curious, how do you guys think about your competitive advantage? Maybe those top 1 or 2 points that you think are going to help you win the industry.
So I think there's a partnership component to it, and I think there's a technical component to it. So I'm going to talk about partners. And so one of the things that I'm fortunate to be part of, and Jeff was there early days of Rally, is to access to Red Cell. And Red Cell is a incubator, for lack of a better term. Grant has taken a significant amount of what he's learned as the chief digital officer for United and as the CEO of Rally, and built an unbelievable partnership of investors, technical experts, healthcare providers. And so our access to data is literally unmatched. And over the next quarters and months, we'll be able to explain more what that is. But it's the access to data and the partnerships that are exceedingly hard to get and unique in a way, because I think there's a lot of technical expertise out there. And under the broad swath of real world evidence or real world data, is being able to, it's one thing to get access to it, but it's also another then to be able to use it in a way to make those predictions. And so I'd say from a partnership standpoint, if you look at our board, it's literally a Fortune 10 board. These are folks that have been experts either in the insurance and their ability to find partners to help us, one, build our team, but also build an opportunity to get access to data and iterate with folks that are at the very top of the industry.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, as David mentioned, I think deep connections into our target market is a big differentiator for us. David also touched on data. One of the things that we need to validate our predictions, we'll generate some of our data ourselves through contracting with CROs, but we also want to leverage real world data. The FDA's orientation to real world data has actually changed quite a bit in recent times. And so anything that we can do to support our claims through the application of real world data is huge. And through our partnerships that David referenced, we believe we have access to the largest set of real world oncology data that exists. So I think from a data and partnership perspective, he's spot on. And then I will just add from a technical perspective, I think, as I mentioned earlier, our catalog of sensitivities, where we've developed quite a bit of IP, is in my mind a differentiator from a technical perspective here as well.
Well, and Jeff's point is good. I'm going to reinforce the fact that it's disingenuous to suggest that there aren't other players in AI-enabled or AI-driven drug discovery, but I think it's finding those niches. We've chose not to start with trying to find novel molecules because, to your point, it's a fairly crowded space. And so we think by finding new and non-obvious applications for existing drugs is really the way initially. That doesn't mean that we can't default if we find something really interesting and go the novel molecule route. And that is a differentiator because there are a lot of people playing in our space, in that niche of our space.
Awesome. That makes sense. So to sum it up, partnerships and the amount of sensitivities that you guys have on your technical solution. Is that a fair assessment?
It is.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, hey guys, we're almost at time for this first episode. Just as we wrap up, you guys raised a pretty massive seed. Are you guys hiring, or is there anything else that you'd like to plug on the pod?
We are definitely always looking for top talent across life sciences, data science, and engineering for sure.
I would say that Jeff is being modest, and I take no credit for this. We built nothing short of an extraordinary team. We can talk a little bit about that later on how we've done it, but we have, as many do, kind of a know what holes ethos on who we hire, because it's a massive collaboration iteration at all hours of every day, 7 days a week. And so finding the best of the best, but also making sure that they are a perfect match for our culture has been our secret sauce. And as it relates to raising, I think everybody's always raising money. I think the current economic environments aren't great for that. I spend most of my days talking to a lot of venture capital folks, and there's folks sitting on the sidelines. I think at our stage, both seed and A, it's a lot easier to raise money at the right valuations as long as you've had the types of insights and the types of accomplishments that we've had, whether it be contract or technical. But we'll look at it. I mean, we could go faster, but in my humble opinion, and the boards, it's not a great time to raise money. We'll go into Q4 and understand if things improve, and as we are currently in Q4, and then into Q1 of next year. But thankfully, given our seed, we're not in a position where we have to do that anytime soon. And we'll look for other vehicles if we want to go fast. But thankfully, we have patient capital, and thankfully, we have a nice runway, a lifelong runway.
That's awesome. And if our listeners want to follow you two personally, David and Jeff, where's the best place to do so? Would it be LinkedIn, Twitter?
Yeah, for sure. I am on LinkedIn.
We're on Twitter. We're on LinkedIn. We're certainly on Instagram as well. And I'm on LinkedIn, and that's the primary way I interact with folks as most CEOs and investors. So
awesome. Cool. There you heard it, folks. Definitely check out their website. It's zephyrai.bio, and definitely check out David and Jeff. They're building something truly inspiring. David and Jeff, this was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the pod. I'm excited for episode number 2. There's going to be a lot to talk about. Thanks, folks. We'll see you next time on the breakouts. All right, and that wraps up today's episode. We really hope you enjoyed it. Now, just before I let you go, I wanted to reiterate one thing. We're trying to build the best podcast out there for aspiring entrepreneurs, and to do that, we need your help. The best way you can help us is by joining our Discord community. The link is in the description below, and then leaving us feedback. Tell us how we did. Tell us how we can improve. We're eagerly waiting to hear from you. Other than that, show us some love and follow us on Twitter at The Breakouts Pod. And I think that's everything I have for you. We'll see you next time on the breakouts.